At the reading of the will, my son-in-law whispered, "She'll die before she spends it all. Better secure the millions now." Everyone laughed. On Monday, my lawyer delivered the letter that knocked them off their chairs. "I'm glad to have you. Here, follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I'm Thelma, 72 years old, and that moment changed everything I thought I knew about my family." The reading of Harold's will was supposed to bring closure. After 47 years of marriage, losing him to cancer felt like losing half of myself. I sat there in the attorney's wood-paneled office, clutching my handkerchief, barely registering the words being spoken. Harold had left everything to me, as we'd always planned. The house in Westfield, our savings, his pension. That's when I heard it. My son-in-law Robert leaning toward my daughter Christine, his voice low but clear enough for my old ears to catch. Every word. "She'll die before she spends it all. Better secure those millions now." And then the laughter. Not just Robert, but Christine, too. My own daughter. I froze, my hand midair reaching for a tissue. They didn't notice my reaction. They never really looked at me these days unless they wanted something. To them, I was just an old woman who happened to be sitting on a pile of money they considered their future inheritance. "Mom? Are you okay?" Christine finally asked, noticing my silence as we walked to the parking lot afterward. "Just tired, dear," I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "You should rest," Robert chimed in, his arm suddenly around my shoulders. "Why don't you come stay with us for a few days? You shouldn't be alone in that big house." I could see it now, the calculating look behind his concerned expression. Had it always been there? How had I missed it? "I'll be fine," I said, pulling away slightly. "Martha is coming over later." Robert's smile tightened at the mention of my closest friend. He'd never liked Martha. Now I understood why. Martha saw through him from day one. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying moments from the past 10 years, the way Robert and Christine visited more frequently after Harold's retirement package was finalized. How they'd bring up the house. "So much maintenance for you, Mom," or my investments. "Are you sure your financial advisor is making the right moves?" I remembered last Christmas, when Robert had taken a sudden interest in my jewelry collection. "Just admiring craftsmanship," he'd said when I caught him examining my diamond tennis bracelet, a 40th anniversary gift from Harold. All those years, I'd been proud to help them. The down payment for their house, college funds for my grandchildren, the loan for Robert's business expansion. I never asked for repayment. They were family. When you have enough, you share with those you love. But now I wondered, did they love me? Or just what I could give them? At 3 a.m., I made a decision. I called my lawyer first thing in the morning. "George, I need to make some changes," I told him. "And I need your absolute discretion." George had been our family attorney for decades. Harold trusted him, and so did I. "Of course, Thelma, what can I do for you?" I explained what I'd overheard, my voice breaking only once. "I'm so sorry," he said, and I could hear the genuine sadness in his voice. "Unfortunately, I've seen this too many times, but we can protect you and make sure your wishes are honored." We met that afternoon. For 3 hours, we restructured everything. By the time I left his office, I felt lighter somehow. The pain was still there, but alongside it was something new. Resolve. "I'll have the documents ready on Monday," George promised. "Once you've signed, I can deliver the notification letter as you requested." That weekend was the longest of my life. Christine called twice, Robert once. Each conversation filled with unusual concern about my well-being. Each question subtly probing about my plans for all that money just sitting there. I answered vaguely, the way they'd always treated my own questions about their frequent financial crises. It was surprisingly easy to deflect. I'd learned from the best. On Monday morning, George arrived with the paperwork. His secretary witnessed my signature on each document. "Are you sure about this, Thelma?" George asked one final time. I thought about Harold, about the life we'd built, about what he would say if he knew our daughter and son-in-law were counting the days until my death. "Absolutely," I replied, signing the final page with a steady hand. Monday afternoon, George delivered the letter as promised. By Monday evening, my phone was ringing nonstop. I let it go to voicemail. For the first time since Harold died, I slept through the night. Tomorrow would bring their fury, their shock, their desperate attempts to change my mind. But tonight, I was at peace with my decision. The betrayal had shattered my heart, but it had also opened my eyes. Christine showed up at my door unannounced the next morning, still wearing her hospital scrubs. Her face was blotchy from crying. "Mom, what have you done?" she demanded, waving, George's letter in her hand. I stepped aside to let her in, my heart pounding despite my resolved exterior. "Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "Coffee? Are you serious? You've just... She couldn't even finish her sentence, collapsing onto my sofa with a sob. I sat across from her, hands folded in my lap. "I've just protected what your father and I worked for our entire lives." The letter had outlined the changes clearly. The family house would be sold, not passed down as they'd expected. Most of the money would go into a trust with specific disbursement conditions. A significant portion was already being donated to the cancer research center that had cared for Harold. "How could you do this to us?" Christine's voice was smaller now. "We were counting on that inheritance." "That's exactly the problem," I said quietly. "You were counting on my death." She flinched. "That's not what we meant. Robert was just... Don't." I raised my hand. "Please don't insult me by lying." We sat in silence, the grandfather clock in the hallway marking each uncomfortable second. "What about the kids?" she finally asked. "You're punishing your own grandchildren." This was the part that had kept me up the previous night. The college. "Funds remain untouched. In fact, I've increased them. But they'll be managed by the trust, not by you and Robert." Christine's eyes narrowed. "You don't trust us." "Should I?" I asked simply. She had no answer for that. After she left, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching spring rain tap against the glass. I expected to feel guilty or doubt my decisions. Instead, I felt clarity. That afternoon, I drove to my grandson Jason's high school to pick him up as I did every Tuesday. At 17, he was the spitting image of Harold, same gentle eyes, same quiet thoughtfulness. "Hey, Grandma," he said, sliding into the passenger seat. Then he noticed my expression. "What's wrong? Your parents didn't call you?" He checked his phone. 3 missed calls from Mom. I was in a test. "What happened?" I pulled into the parking lot of the small ice cream shop we frequented and turned off the engine. "I need to tell you something, and I want you to hear it from me first," I explained. The situation in simple terms, omitting the cruelest details. Jason listened intently, his face serious. "I'm not surprised," he finally said, staring at his hands. "You're not?" He shook his head. "Dad's been talking about your money for years. Last month he was showing Mom brochures for vacation homes in Florida. Said they'd buy it when the time comes." I thought it was gross. My heart sank further. "I'm sorry you had to hear that." "I'm sorry they said it," Jason replied, suddenly looking much older than his years. "What are you going to do now, Grandma?" "Live," I said simply, "and make sure the money goes where it should." Over ice cream, Jason told me about his college applications and his hopes to study engineering. We didn't mention the trust or the inheritance again, but when he hugged me goodbye, he whispered, "I'm on your side, Grandma. Always." At least I hadn't lost everyone. That evening, Robert called. Unlike Christine, he skipped the emotional appeals and went straight to threats. "We'll contest this, Thelma. No judge will uphold these changes when they hear you made them immediately after Harold's death. You're clearly not in your right mind." "My doctor and therapist would disagree," I replied calmly. "George made sure everything is legally sound." "This isn't over," he growled before hanging up. I spent the next few days piecing together the extent of their financial troubles. It wasn't difficult. I just needed to look more closely at what had been right in front of me. The emergency loan Robert had requested last year hadn't gone to business expansion as claimed. County records showed a lien against their house had been resolved that same week. They were nearly in foreclosure, and I had unknowingly saved them. Credit card statements I'd helped Christine organize after Harold's funeral showed massive debt, luxury purchases, expensive restaurants, a vacation to Bali. They were living far beyond their means, spending money they didn't have, confident that my millions would eventually erase their recklessness. Most disturbing was what I found when I checked the college. Savings accounts I'd established for the grandchildren. The balances were significantly lower than they should have been. Someone had been making withdrawals, small enough to stay under my radar, but substantial over time. Only Christine had access besides me. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by financial statements and bitter revelations, and felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't just about an insensitive comment overheard at a vulnerable moment. This was about years of deception and entitlement. Harold would be heartbroken. The thought of his disappointment in our daughter brought fresh tears to my eyes. My phone buzzed with a text from Martha. "Lunch tomorrow? You need to get out of that house." I smiled weakly. Martha had been calling daily, checking in. Unlike my family, her concern was genuine. "Yes," I texted back. "I have a lot to tell you." Then I gathered all the financial evidence into a folder for George. Whatever came next, I would be prepared. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, the doorbell rang. I hesitated, checking the time. Nearly 10 p.m. Too late for casual visitors. When I peeked through the curtains, I saw my granddaughter Emma on the porch, hugging herself against the evening chill, a small overnight bag at her feet. I opened the door immediately. "Emma, what's wrong?" Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Can I stay with you tonight, Grandma? Mom and Dad won't stop fighting about money and—" Her voice cracked. "About you." I pulled her into a hug, feeling her shoulders shake with silent sobs. "Of course you can stay, sweetheart, as long as you need." As I made up the guest bed, I realized the true cost of Robert and Christine's greed was higher than I'd calculated. It wasn't just my trust they'd broken. They were damaging their own children with their obsession over my money. That settled it. I wouldn't back down, no matter what came next. Breakfast with Emma the next morning was surprisingly peaceful. She helped me make blueberry pancakes, Harold's specialty, and for a moment, the kitchen felt alive again. "Do you have to go back home today?" I asked, watching her methodically cut her pancakes into perfect squares, just as she had since childhood. "Mom said to come straight home after school," she replied, not meeting my eyes. "She said they need to talk to me about family matters." The way she said family matters made my heart ache. At 15, Emma was caught in the middle of a battle she didn't create. "You're always welcome here," I said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "No matter what." After dropping Emma at school, I headed straight to George's office. My lawyer looked tired, deep lines etched around his eyes. "Robert's lawyer called yesterday," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "They're suggesting you underwent undue emotional distress when making these changes." I placed the folder of financial documents on his desk. "I expected as much. That's why I brought these." George reviewed the evidence methodically, The mysterious withdrawals from the grandchildren's college funds, the foreclosure notice on Christine and Robert's house that coincided with their emergency loan request, the credit card statements showing their extravagant lifestyle. "This strengthens our position considerably," George said finally. "But Thelma, are you prepared for how ugly this might get? Family disputes over inheritance can destroy relationships permanently." I thought about Robert's whispered words at the will reading, about Christine's tearful visit centered entirely on what she stood to lose, not what I had lost. "The relationships were already destroyed," I said quietly. I just didn't know it. Back home, I found Martha waiting on my porch with a casserole and determined expression. "You missed lunch," she said, following me inside. "So I brought lunch to you." Over chicken pot pie, I told her everything: the overheard conversation, the financial discoveries, Emma's late-night arrival. Martha listened without interrupting. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth several times in shock or dismay. "I always thought Robert was a pompous ass," she said finally. "But this goes beyond that." I laughed despite myself. Martha had never minced words. "What's your next move?" she asked. "I've made the legal changes, but that's just the beginning. I need to establish clear boundaries. No more random financial gifts or loans. No more solving their problems." Martha nodded approvingly. "And the house? You mentioned selling it in the letter?" "The house. Our home for 43 years. Every corner held memories of Harold. His reading chair by the bay window, the slightly crooked shelf he installed in the pantry, the garden he tended so carefully. "I can't stay here," I admitted. "It's too big. And now it feels tainted." Martha finished for me. "By their expectations." Exactly. We spent the afternoon researching smaller homes in the area. Nothing too far from the grandchildren, but far enough from Christine and Robert to establish some separation. By evening, I had appointments with 3 realtors to evaluate my house and 2 viewings scheduled for potential new homes. The next day brought another confrontation. Christine and Robert arrived unannounced just as I was heading out to meet the first realtor. "We need to talk about this rationally," Christine said, trying to push past me into the house. "I have an appointment," I replied, closing the door behind me. "We can talk later if you call first." Robert stepped forward, his tall frame intentionally intimidating. "You're selling the family home now? Do you have any idea what you're doing?" "To Christine? To our family?" I met his gaze steadily. "Yes, I do. I'm protecting what Harold and I built from people who see me as nothing but a checkbook with an expiration date." Christine gasped. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I turned to her. "When was the last time you visited without asking for something? When was the last time you called just to check on me, not to see if I could watch the kids or help with some bill?" She had no answer. "And you," I said to Robert, "have been planning how to spend my money while I'm still very much alive." "Don't deny it. Jason heard you discussing vacation homes when the time comes." The color drained from Robert's face. "He's just a kid. He misunderstood." "No, he didn't. Now please move. My realtor is waiting." As I walked to my car, Christine called after me. "Mom, please, we can work this out." I paused, turning back. "I'm not cutting you off completely. The trust will still provide for the grandchildren's education. You and Robert will receive modest yearly distributions once you've repaid what you took from the college funds." Their shocked expressions confirmed what I already knew. They never expected to be held accountable. The meeting with the realtor went well. She suggested minor updates to maximize the house's value, but overall felt it would sell quickly in the current market. As she walked through each room taking notes, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. That evening, Jason called to check on me. "Mom told me you're selling the house," he said, his voice careful. "Are you okay with that?" "It's time for a change," I replied. "Something smaller, easier to manage." "I'll miss this place," he admitted, but I get it. Where are you thinking of moving? I told him about the 2 properties I'd be viewing. The one on Maple Street is only 10 minutes from my college, he noted. If I get in, I mean. When you get in, I corrected gently. And yes, I noticed that too. We talked for nearly an hour about his college hopes, his concerns for Emma, and finally, about his parents. They're worried, he said. Really worried about money. I overheard Dad saying something about refinancing the house again. This didn't surprise me. Jason, I want you to know that whatever happens between me and your parents, it won't affect my relationship with you or Emma. Your college funds are secure. I'm not worried about the money, Grandma, he said, his voice suddenly thick. I just don't want to lose you. After we hung up, I sat in Harold's old chair, watching darkness settle over the garden. The weight of the past week pressed heavily on my shoulders, but beneath it was a growing certainty. I was doing the right thing, not just for myself, but for Jason and Emma too. They needed to see that there were consequences to treating people as means to an end, even family members. Especially family members. Tomorrow, I would view potential new homes. I would meet with George to finalize the trust details. I would begin the next chapter of my life. Harold would approve, I thought. He always said we raised Christine to stand on her own 2 feet. It was time she finally learned how. 2 weeks passed in a flurry of activity. I listed the house, found a lovely garden apartment in a senior-friendly community near Jason's prospective college, and finalized the trust arrangements with George. I was moving forward, despite the constant barrage of emotional appeals from Christine. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly their tactics would change. It started with a phone call from Dr. Klein, my primary physician for the past decade. Mrs. Wilson? Your daughter called expressing concerns about your recent behavior. She mentioned rapid decision-making, possible memory issues. I gripped the phone tighter. I assume she mentioned I've modified my will and am selling my house. Dr. Klein paused. She did reference financial decisions that seemed out of character. I see. My voice remained calm, though my pulse raced. Would you like me to come in for an evaluation? If you don't mind, just as a precaution. I'll be there tomorrow morning, I said firmly. After hanging up, I called George immediately. They're setting the groundwork to challenge your competency, he said, confirming my fears. This is a common tactic when family members contest estate changes. What should I do? See Dr. Klein, absolutely. Be forthcoming. Take any cognitive tests he offers. We'll also arrange for an independent evaluation from a geriatric specialist not connected to your family. The implications were clear. Christine and Robert were no longer just upset. They were actively trying to invalidate my decisions by suggesting I was mentally incompetent. The next day, Dr. Klein administered a thorough cognitive assessment. I answered every question precisely, completed every task perfectly. Mrs. Wilson, he said finally, I see no indication of cognitive impairment whatsoever. Your memory and decision-making capabilities are excellent for a person of any age. I nodded, relieved but not surprised. Will you document that in my file? Already done. He hesitated, then added, I've known you and your family for many years. Whatever's happening, I hope you can resolve it amicably. So do I replied, though I doubted that was still possible. When I returned home, Christine's car was in my driveway. I found her in my living room going through a drawer in Harold's desk. What are you doing? I demanded. She jumped, nearly dropping the stack of papers in her hand. Mom, I was just looking for Dad's old watch. Jason's graduation is coming up. And I thought, the lie was so transparent it didn't deserve acknowledgement. Please put everything back and leave, now. Don't be like this, she pleaded. I was just looking for financial documents, evidence of unusual behavior, something to support your claim that I'm losing my mind? Christine's face flushed. Dr. Klein called you. Of course he did. I'm his patient, not you. I held the door open pointedly. We have nothing more to discuss today. After she left, I checked the desk thoroughly. Several folders had been disturbed, including one containing recent bank statements. I'd need to be more careful about what I left accessible. That evening, Robert called. Thelma, we need to talk about what's best for you moving forward. I'm listening, I said, curious about their next move. Christine and I have been researching assisted living communities. There's an excellent one in Maplewood. I cut him off. I'm not moving to assisted living, Robert. It's not what you think, he said quickly. These are luxury apartments with support services available if needed. Many residents are completely independent. Then why would I need it? He sighed as if explaining to a difficult child. You've been through a trauma, Thelma. Losing Harold, living alone for the first time in decades. It's affecting your judgment. My judgment is perfectly sound, as Dr. Klein confirmed today. A brief silence. He shouldn't have discussed that with you. I'm his patient, I repeated. Not you. We're just worried about you, Robert insisted. The sudden decision to sell the house, the changes to the will, these aren't like you. Perhaps you never really knew me, I suggested. Or perhaps I've changed since discovering what you and Christine really think of me. After hanging up, I called Martha and asked her to come over. While waiting, I walked through each room, taking photos of how everything was arranged. If they were going to snoop in my absence, I wanted documentation of any disturbances. Martha arrived with a bottle of wine and her usual bluntness. They're trying to have you declared incompetent, aren't they? I nodded, pouring us each a glass. They suggested assisted living today. Bastards, she muttered, then raised her glass. To outsmarting the vultures. We spent the evening developing a strategy. Martha would accompany me to house viewings and meetings with realtors, an additional witness to my mental clarity. Would install a security system with cameras. Most importantly, I would document every interaction with Christine and Robert. They're underestimating you, Martha said as she left. That's their biggest mistake. The next day brought another surprise. Robert's mother, Eleanor, called me for the first time since Harold's funeral. Thelma, dear, I've been hearing concerning things, she began, her voice syrupy with false concern. Christine says you've been acting erratically. Did she mention why I've made these changes, Eleanor? I kept my tone pleasant. Something about a misunderstanding at the will reading? It wasn't a misunderstanding. I clearly heard Robert say I would die before spending it all, and that they should secure those millions now. Everyone laughed. Eleanor was silent for a moment. Well, grief makes us perceive things differently sometimes. I perceive things very clearly now, I replied, including who truly cares about me versus who cares about what I can provide. After ending the call, I wasn't surprised when Christine texted, Even Grandma Eleanor is worried about you now. Please reconsider before. This goes too far. Their coordinated pressure campaign was intensifying. That night, I carefully documented every interaction, every attempt to undermine me, and emailed it all to George. His response was immediate. They're building a case. We need to be proactive. The following Monday, I met with a geriatric psychiatrist recommended by George. After a 3-hour evaluation more thorough than anything Dr. Klein had administered, Dr. Sharma provided a detailed report affirming my cognitive health and decision-making capacity. You're sharper than most of my colleagues, she commented, with a smile. Armed with this documentation, I felt more secure, but I underestimated Robert and Christine's determination. When I arrived home, they were waiting with a stranger who introduced himself as a social worker from Adult Protective Services. We've received a report of possible elder exploitation, he explained, looking uncomfortable. Your daughter and son-in-law are concerned that someone may be influencing your financial decisions. I nearly laughed at the audacity. The only people attempting to exploit me are standing right beside you. For the next hour, I calmly explained, The situation, showing the social worker my documentation, the cognitive assessments, the financial evidence of Christine and Robert's misappropriation of funds, and George's legal opinion. By the time he left, the social worker was apologizing for the intrusion. "This appears to be a family dispute, not an exploitation case," he concluded. Christine was furious. "You're destroying this family, Mom." "No," I corrected her, suddenly exhausted by it all. "Greed is destroying this family. Your greed." As they stormed out, I realized they had forced my hand. It was time to accelerate my plans. Time to show them exactly what happened when they pushed too far. I called George from my newly secured landline. "I'm ready for the next step." The day of reckoning arrived sooner than expected. 3 offers came in on the house, all above asking price. I accepted the highest one, a young family with 2 children who loved Harold's garden as much as he had. They would bring new life to these old walls. That same afternoon, George called with news that the trust paperwork was finalized and ready for signatures. Everything was falling into place faster than Christine and Robert could counter. "I think it's time," I told George. "Let's schedule the family meeting." He agreed. "Your new apartment will be ready next week. The timing works perfectly." I sent a formal email to Christine and Robert, copying Jason and Emma. "Family meeting. This Saturday, 2 p.m. at my house. Attendance is mandatory for all family members. George will be present." Robert responded almost immediately. "We have plans this weekend." "Cancel them," I replied simply. Christine called, her voice tight with tension. "What's this about, Mom?" "Everything," I said. "It's time we put all our cards on the table." Saturday arrived with a perfect spring sky, the kind of day Harold would have spent in his garden. I prepared a light lunch. Nothing elaborate, just sandwiches and fruit. This wasn't a social occasion. George arrived first, carrying a leather portfolio and a reassuring smile. "Ready?" I nodded. After weeks of manipulation and undermining, I was more than ready. Jason and Emma arrived next, both looking nervous. I hugged them tightly, whispering, "No matter what happens today, remember I love you both." Christine and Robert arrived last, precisely at 2 p.m. Robert's face was a mask of professional politeness. Christine couldn't quite hide her anxiety. "Thank you all for coming," I began once we were seated in the living room. "I've called this meeting because it's time to address what's been happening since Harold died." Robert shifted in his seat. "Thelma, if this is about the changes to your will, it's about much more than that," I interrupted. "It's about respect, honesty, and consequences." I turned to George, who opened his portfolio and distributed folders to each person. "What's this?" Christine asked, flipping through the contents. "Evidence," I replied. "Of financial impropriety, of attempts to have me declared incompetent, of plans to access my assets before my death." Emma gasped, looking at her parents with wide eyes. "That's ridiculous," Robert sputtered. "We've only ever had your best interests at heart." "Really?" I pulled out my phone and pressed play on a recording I'd made weeks ago at the will reading. Robert's voice filled the room. "She'll die before she spends it all. Better secure those millions now." Then the unmistakable sound of laughter, Christine's included. The color drained from both their faces. "You recorded us?" Christine whispered. "I didn't need to. I heard you clearly the first time. This recording was from George's assistant, who was documenting the will reading for legal purposes." George nodded confirmation. "The recording is admissible. In court, should it come to that," I continued, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "Page 3 contains bank statements showing withdrawals from Jason and Emma's college funds. Withdrawals made by you, Christine, totaling $42,000 over the past 2 years." Jason looked at his mother in shock. "You took money from our college accounts?" Christine couldn't meet his eyes. "It was temporary. We were going to replace it." "With my inheritance," I finished for her. Except now there won't be a lump sum inheritance for you to access. Robert leaned forward aggressively. You can't do this to us. We're your family. Family doesn't try to have each other declared incompetent for financial gain, I replied, gesturing to the documentation of their calls to Dr. Klein and Adult Protective Services. Family doesn't plan for someone's death to solve their financial problems. Emma was crying silently now, her shoulders shaking. Everything I've built with Harold will still benefit this family, I continued more gently, looking at my grandchildren. But with protections in place, Jason and Emma's education will be fully funded through the trust. The annual distributions to Christine and Robert will continue as long as certain conditions are met. What conditions? Robert demanded. George stepped in. Financial counseling for one, repayment of the misappropriated college funds for another, and most importantly, respect for Mrs. Wilson's autonomy and decisions. This is blackmail, Christine hissed. No, I corrected her. This is a boundary, something I should have established long ago. I stood up, signaling the end of the discussion phase. The house has been sold. I'm moving to Cedar Ridge Apartments next week. The proceeds from the sale will go into the trust, except for what I need to comfortably live on for the rest of my life, which, despite Robert's hopes, might be quite a long time yet. Robert opened his mouth to protest, but Christine placed a restraining hand on his arm, finally recognizing the futility of further argument. What happens now? Jason asked, looking between all of us. That depends on your parents, I answered honestly. I'm open to rebuilding our relationship, but only on terms of mutual respect. Christine stood abruptly. We need time to process this. Take all the time you need, I replied. The trust terms are non-negotiable. After they left, Jason and Emma stayed behind, both visibly shaken by the revelations. Did you know? Emma asked her brother, still wiping tears. He shook his head. Not all of it. Not about the college funds. I sat between them on the couch, taking their hands in mine. I'm sorry you had to hear all that. I wanted to protect you, but you're both old enough to understand the truth. Are Mom and Dad going to be okay? Emma's voice was small. Financially? Yes, if they make better choices. As for the rest, I sighed. That's up to them. Jason squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, Grandma. Standing up for yourself like this. His words brought unexpected tears to my eyes. In all the weeks of conflict, no one had said they were proud of me. After the grandchildren left, George and I sat in the quiet house reviewing the meeting. They'll cool down eventually, he predicted. Once they realize the trust actually provides long-term security. Maybe, I said, not entirely convinced. But that's not why I did this. I know. He smiled kindly. You did it because it was right. That evening, as sunset painted Harold's garden in golden light, I walked through each room of the house one last time. This chapter was ending, but not the way Christine and Robert had planned. I placed my hand on the wall Harold and I had painted together when we first moved in. I did it, I whispered, hoping somehow he could hear. I stood up for us both. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Emma and I are coming to help you pack tomorrow. Love you, Grandma. Despite everything, I smiled. Not all was lost after all. 6 months can change everything. My garden apartment at Cedar Ridge bloomed with late summer flowers, brightening the small patio where I now spent my mornings with coffee and a book. The space was modest compared to the family home, just 2 bedrooms and a cozy living area. But it felt right. It felt like mine. The doorbell chimed, and I smiled, knowing who it would be. Saturday mornings belonged to Jason and Emma now. Grandma! Emma rushed in, carrying a bakery box. At 16, she'd grown more confident since the family confrontation, less worried about pleasing everyone. I brought those lemon scones you like, Jason followed with his laptop. And I've got the college applications ready to review. The past 6 months had created a new rhythm for us. While Christine and Robert maintained a cool distance, my relationship with my grandchildren had deepened beyond anything I could have imagined. "How are your parents?" I asked as I poured coffee for Jason and hot chocolate for Emma. They exchanged glances. "They started the financial counseling," Jason said carefully. "Dad's looking for a new job. The real estate market's down, so—" I nodded, understanding the unspoken. Robert's commission-based income had likely suffered, especially with luxury properties. "Mom asked if you got the check," Emma added, stirring her hot chocolate. I did. The first repayment toward the college funds had arrived yesterday. Small, but a start. That's a positive step. We settled into our usual Saturday routine. College applications for Jason, who would be graduating in the spring, and art projects with Emma. Today, she was organizing photos for a scrapbook. "I found these at Dad's office," she said, spreading out old pictures of Christine as a child. "He was cleaning out filing cabinets and didn't want them." My heart twinged as I looked at the faded photographs. Christine on her first bicycle, at her 8th grade graduation, building sandcastles with Harold at the beach. Memories from before money and status became her measuring sticks for success. "Your mother was always determined," I told Emma. "Even as a little girl. She knew what she wanted and went after it." "Like you," Emma observed, glancing up with a smile. The comparison startled me. I'd never thought of Christine and myself as similar. "Maybe," I conceded. "Though I hope I've been wiser about what's truly worth wanting." By afternoon, Jason had submitted 3 college applications, all to schools within an hour's drive. "I want to be able to come over easily," he explained when I asked about his choices, "especially during freshman year." His consideration warmed my heart. "You know I'll be fine either way. Don't limit your options because of me." He shook his head firmly. "It's not just for you. I need this too." After the grandchildren left, I prepared for my weekly dinner with Martha. Our friendship had only strengthened through the family crisis, and she'd become a regular fixture in my new life. "The place looks more like you every time I visit," she remarked, admiring the new bookshelves Jason had helped install. "Less Harold, more Thelma." I hadn't thought about it that way, but she was right. The house had been filled with Harold's preferences: dark wood furniture, landscape paintings, heavy drapes. Here, I'd chosen lighter pieces, colorful textiles, and photographs of places I hoped to visit. "I'm finding myself again," I admitted, serving the vegetable lasagna we'd made together the previous week. Parts of me that got lost somewhere along the way. "Better late than never." Martha raised her wine glass in a toast. "To Thelma 2.0. We laughed, but there was truth in her jest. I was different now, stronger, clearer about my boundaries, unafraid to protect what mattered. The doorbell interrupted our dessert. Martha raised an eyebrow. "Expecting someone?" I wasn't. When I opened the door, Christine stood there, looking uncertain. "Mom," she said softly, "can we talk?" I glanced back at Martha, who was already gathering her purse. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said, giving Christine a measured nod as she slipped past. Alone with my daughter, I gestured to the living room. "Would you like some coffee? Tea?" She shook her head, perching on the edge of the sofa. "Nice place," she offered. "Cozy." "Thank you." I sat across from her, waiting. Christine twisted her wedding ring nervously. "I've been seeing a therapist," she finally said. Part of the financial counseling turned into more. This surprised me. Christine had always rejected therapy, calling it unnecessary navel-gazing. "That's good," I said cautiously. "She thinks I have some issues with money and security." Christine gave a short, humorless laugh. "Obviously, right? But it goes deeper than I realized. back to when Dad lost his job when I was 10. I remembered that difficult year. Harold unemployed for 8 months, our savings dwindling, the constant stress. I was so scared then, Christine continued. I used to check the mailbox for bills and hide the ones that looked important, thinking if you didn't see them, we wouldn't have to pay. I didn't know that, I said softly, imagining my little girl carrying such a burden. After Dad got back on his feet, I promised myself I'd never feel that insecure again. She looked up, her eyes damp. I think that's when money became everything to me. Safety, worth, status. I nodded, beginning to understand. And Robert? The same, in his way. His parents struggled too. She sighed deeply. It doesn't excuse what we did, what we said, but I'm trying to understand it, to fix it. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of decades of misunderstanding between us. I miss Dad, she said finally, and I miss you. I'm right here, I replied gently. No, I mean the relationship we used to have, before all this. I considered her words carefully. I'm not sure we can go back to that, Christine. Too much has happened. Her face fell. But, I continued, perhaps we can build something new, something better. I'd like to try, she whispered. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. After Christine left, I sat on my patio watching the stars emerge. The evening had brought an unexpected turn, a tentative olive branch after months of conflict. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Mom just called, said she talked to you. You okay? I smiled at his concern. I'm fine. It was a good start. Life would never be simple with Christine and Robert. The trust would remain necessary. Some lessons couldn't be unlearned quickly. But perhaps, with time and continued effort on their part, healing was possible. 2 weeks later, I boarded a plane for the first time in 15 years. Bound. For a 2-week tour of the national parks Harold and I had always planned to visit someday. Martha sat beside me, equally excited about our adventure. Nervous? She asked, as the plane began its ascent. Not about flying, I replied, watching the familiar landscape of my life shrink beneath us. About living, at 72, with a family, in various stages of repair and a future entirely my own to shape. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. Harold would have approved, I thought. Not of the family conflict, but of my refusal to be diminished by it. He always said I was stronger than I knew. He was right. The plane climbed higher, carrying me toward new horizons, both literal and figurative. I had stood my ground. I had protected what mattered. And in doing so, I had discovered that the legacy worth preserving wasn't financial at all. It was dignity, self-respect, the courage to say, enough. That was the true inheritance I wanted to leave my grandchildren, and perhaps, someday even Christine would understand its value. For now, though, the journey was mine to enjoy. The road ahead open, the possibilities endless, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was genuinely excited to see what came next. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.